Right. Gentlemen, thank you very much for agreeing to do this.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Who are you?
So I am Ross.
And I am David, aka Dimples,
Yes.
and we are the Damp Nights.
Nights.
And
Or Damp Night Comedy.
so, what kind of comedy does Damp Night?
We
Comedy
are
specialise?
improvised comedy, predominantly.
Mainly, yeah.
But we do filmed and live sketches as well for our shows.
Yeah, varies from the borderline silly to the insane when it comes to the ideas and sketches that we do, and the improv is far more silly
Yes.
because that is off the cuff and there is no editing available.
So, how often do you do live shows?
We used to do them about twice a year at the Maltings.
Yeah, and then gigs around the country where we could.
hmm
So you do tour?
Yes.
Yeah, we have toured.
We did one
2017, 2018.
for Alien Abduction.
And then we've gigged singularly in Newcastle, Edinburgh, Glasgow, but COVID and the lockdowns kind of killed.
Dampened that.
It's dampened all of our
Very good.
Thank you.
all of our not all of our opportunities, but there's now a lot more people trying to get into a lot fewer opportunities, and we are struggling, I'd say, to find slots.
The
especially
creativity and
in
ideas
office.
were still there, but finding a place to do them
Yeah.
or how to do them wasn't as prominent.
Yeah. So is that still the case? Is it still more comedians than there are places?
I would say so, definitely, yeah.
I'd say audiences play a part as well. I mean, we opened our own, or we tried to open our own comedy club, like on a quarterly basis, and the audiences just didn't want to come out.
Yeah.
I think the first couple,
The first one was
first
really
couple
busy.
were really busy, and then they kind of go, well, I've seen it now, I don't want to come back. So
Yeah.
it's just trying to convince audiences to come out when currently it's the cost of living crisis going on. It's just
But that was a completely different start. That was just stand-up shows. We tried to get other comedians in to do the show. We'd be the host and maybe do a bit of our own stuff, but it was predominantly other comedians. I think the problem with that is people go, don't know who it is, not going to come see it. If you haven't got one big name to pull someone in, you kind of don't want to know.
So is that the sort of television issue? The fact that if you don't have someone who's been on, I don't know,
Like the Apollo and stuff like
Mock
that.
the Week.
Yeah.
I think especially in the northeast of England, maybe Newcastle not so much, but anyone not in the city, between say Newcastle and Edinburgh, I'd say you struggle to get someone out on a regular basis if they're not for household names.
Yeah.
And even price is a problem as well. You've got to keep prices down for audiences, but you've got to bring in a decent amount of money to pay your acts. So
Yeah.
it's a balancing act there.
Because we wanted to start it off, get it going, and then get it known, and then you can get a bigger name in to host each one or headline each one. But you can't start with a headliner, and headliners cost a lot.
Yeah.
And they're not willing to come to middle of nowhere to do.
A 60 seat or an 80 seat venue,
Yeah.
they need a guarantee of £2,000, £3,000, and we weren't in a position to do that.
No.
Well, on that cheery note, how did you guys sort of meet up? How did it? Because you're not all here. I mean, obviously Mark's
No.
here.
Yeah, well, Mark's here,
but
and Oliver's this dog for now.
Yeah.
Because we're all busy individuals all the time. So we basically met through youth theatre at the Maltings. We've all been part of it at different times. So Neil, who's also not here but with us, he was finishing youth theatre when I started, and then I went away to college and uni and came back, and now I help run it, and that's when Oliver and Dimples were part of it as well. So we kind of met through that, and it was just doing silly shows, silly games and stuff.
There's a game in particular that we used to play at the end of each rehearsal or meeting or whatever you want to call it, session called Park Bench.
Yeah.
And especially for me and Oliver, and I think you joined in as well because you were kind of half running it, half part of it then at the time. But it's an improv game where if you see a funny situation, you shout freeze and jump in and you switch up the situation. And we kind of found that when it was towards the end of mine and Oliver's like run there, the three of us were the ones just constantly just cycling. Everyone was kind of sitting back and watching us rather than taking part, which is great for us because we get a bit of laugh, have a bit of fun, and everyone else gets to laugh at us. But it wasn't the point of the game; it was the point to get everyone thinking. And we just kind of thought one day, why not try this at a comedy club? And we did.
Because I found devising stuff at youth theatre, like making up stories, was fun enough. But when you got to Park Bench, I loved being in there without a clue, and someone else comes in, changes the whole situation for you, and you've got to think on your feet. And I enjoyed that more than the going in with an idea. I preferred someone changing it suddenly.
You're a bit of an adrenaline junkie on stage, aren't you?
Yeah.
You like to know a script, and he's like, "That's not enough anymore. Got to do some music and dancing. No, it's not enough anymore.
Not enough.
Got to do some improv and not know what's going to go on."
It's got to
Actually, I think I did that as well. I missed out a lot of the acting and singing and dancing and just jumped straight to improv.
Yeah.
But it's a different kind of rush when you're on stage. Like the adrenaline, just of like, I've got to think now, and it's got to be funny, or it's got to be got to pitch the ball up for Ross or Oliver or Neil or Mark when he was around to make funny. So it's that constant fear of let's go.
Yeah, and so when we did the first show, well, actually, I was looking back at the stuff, and we originally tried to make a comedy sitcom with a lot of different people, and everyone's different ideas just didn't work together. And then we kind of got to the main thing of me, Oliver and Dimples enjoy improv. Let's take some of the ideas of that and get in touch, because there was a Laughing Bear comedy club at the Maltings. Used to be monthly, long time ago.
We got like a 10-minute slot.
Yeah,
like that.
because when I spoke to him, I said, "Can we just do a bit in the interval? We don't really want a big slot." And he says, "No, you can have a main bit." So we got, I think it was just before or just after the interval. And I remember it was great because we're sitting there going, "Got no idea what we're going to do," and all the other comedians are like, "Oh, what have you prepared?" I'm like, "Nothing. We've got 3 hats with suggestions in that people have wrote." And they're like, "But what if it doesn't work?" I'm like, "Well, no, see what happens."
Diana Ross.
Yeah.
And to compare that night, I can't remember his name, but he was great because after the first couple of things, he saw what we were doing, and he was, as we were acting out the scene, as we would usually do in a live show, pull them out and just go with whatever happens. He was going through and finding things that worked, that he thought were funny together, and then would give us those 3, which, I mean, it's technically not improv because someone knows what's going to happen, but for us, it was...
Well, it's the same as some of the audience going, "Freeze, you're all badgers now."
Yeah.
You've got to go with it.
But I think that sparked it. I think that was maybe 2015, 2014.
I think it might have been 2014, and our first show was 2015.
And then a year later, after meeting some other people, Paul Summers, who does our music, because we do some live music games, Slink, who films and did all our editing for us. After that year, we kind of had a script together, and we just went, right, let's do a show. And
we planned it for a while, and I was like, "Look, we'll book us in," and then you have to do it.
And that 10 minutes of that compere kind of like pushing us with a stick turned into an hour or 2 hours of us just making a show up and just see how it went, and it went quite well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, from the sounds of it, you almost have your own roles within the company?
To an extent, yes. It's all...
Because at one time it was described that Ollie is the one who goes out there with his additions to it.
So what we kind of do creating things wise is, for example, if anyone has an idea for a sketch, it's usually someone has an idea, any one of us could have an idea, and the rest go, "Cool, let's see it." And then we all go, "What about this? What about this? What about this? What about this?" And we build it into this complete insane mess. Mm-hmm. And then we act it out, and Slink usually squashes it back into a video for us, or we make it into a compressed sketch.
What we lack, we do have individual roles. One role we do lack is someone to say no.
Yes.
We need someone to be like, "That's a stupid idea," or "That's not going to work," or like, "What are you thinking?" Because we all just, once we find something funny, it just snowballs. And we go, "How about this? And how about this? And how about this?"
Well, the best example of that is the Ouija sketch for Nightmare on Elk Street, which is the second show we did. And we actually filmed a trailer for it, and they lost the footage, which was insane. I don't know if it's a good thing they lost the footage. It was basically...
It was like a parody of the Thriller video?
Yes.
But
so there's these 3 people, their car breaks down, So they run into this building, and in the building they meet three characters. There's Meat Santa, because you meet Santa, but he was meat, he had an apron and blood and stuff.
Cheese the clown.
Cheese the Clown, which was Dimples. So he had a clown costume with cheese on him. And the final one was myself as Freddie Mercury.
Freddy Krueger.
Freddie Krueger. And so my outfit was, I had bread shoes, loafers.
And
I had
a tortilla skirt.
a tortilla skirt, a bread mask and bread hands, and that was it. So nothing else on. And then they find us in each room in this house.
It basically turns Scooby-Doo.
Yeah.
And there's a chase scene. In the end, we end up running together and turning into a ham and cheese sandwich. But luckily, we lost that.
Yeah.
But we had to think on the fly, and we thought, right, a quick Ouija board sketch.
Yeah.
And it just snowballed on the night that
but
we
it
were
was
filming.
just us. We didn't have so it wasn't the cameraman this time. It was just us. So we set the camera up. What about this? What about this? So it started the Ouija board. Then it started with me appearing. Then a new Ouija board, and then trying to find Neil, and Michael Jackson was there at one point as a ghost.
So this 2-minute trailer turned into a 9-minute epic, which just you lose the audience about 2.5 minutes in. Circling back to the roles we play.
Yes.
This is a perfect example of that.
Yes.
Yeah. Ollie, I would say Ollie, yes. He's definitely not the one to take it too far, but the one to take it left field.
Yeah.
Like, if it's going to go...
People assume it's you
Yeah.
that goes too far, but Oliver's suggestions are very out there.
Especially in private.
Yeah.
Especially when we're rehearsing. And I think I would say I'm more the straight man.
Mm-hmm.
I'm less silly when we do improv.
Yeah.
You might disagree, but I'm happy to get the odd joke in here and there, but facilitate everyone else's getting laughs, and I'm absolutely fine with that.
I think that's what you need in it, though. It can't all be complete crazy
can't
characters. It works with each other. Everyone works together.
I think I'm good with one-liners as well.
Yeah.
I'm just like...
So does that then translate into writing the sketch stuff? You occupy the same roles as you do in improv live as you do when you're writing?
I think it mixes around. Like it depends whose idea the sketch is originally. Because Dimples could start with a very straight idea of, I've got an idea for an advert about talking cars or whatever. I'm like, okay, cool, I see the punchline. What if this happened? And everyone has a bit into it. But I think when the people originally have an idea, it's quite a straight idea.
Yeah, it's quite a normal, and then we do pile on.
Yeah.
Do you ever find that when you bring something in yourselves and you kind of go, okay, I've got this idea for a sketch, it's this, and just as you're about to say the rest of it, everybody else piles on, you're like, no,
Yes.
it's this.
Yeah.
Yes and no. I mean, we've got a...
Yes and.
Yes and. We've got a group chat, which we got 2 group chats. One is for general discussion about rehearsals and gigs and how's everyone doing, and one is purely for sketch ideas. And if you scroll through that, I mean, I could post something 2 days ago and I'm like, what did I mean by that? But that's the one where people go, oh, we can do this, and we can do this, and we can do this. And by the time, especially if someone has the time to form it a bit more fully and then bring it to the group in a vocal sense rather than just a 6-word message onto a group chat, that's when it goes, yes, this, and we're going to add this, and we're going to add this. There's a few sketches that we've actually done where released where you can watch and you go, right, well that's the point where the idea ended, and that's Ross's idea, and that's Ollie's idea, and that's my idea, and that's Neil's idea. And there's some sketches that we haven't released because Slink is still editing them 7 years later because we wanted a School of Owls like a real mermaid and stuff like that. So it's just, you can see those parts.
Yeah, I think with that as well, with some of the recorded sketches, some of them aren't what we wanted, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like we want some extreme stuff, and not editing wise, like we had these crazy ideas, and it just comes to actually doing them.
I think our ideas in our heads are that we have a full TV studio or a full movie studio behind us and a movie studio budget, and in our heads, and when we plan it out, we've got all these grand ideas, but then when it comes to actually doing it, we make so many compromises with costumes, with editing, with venue, with extras that it just lets us down a little bit. And sometimes we release it because we need content to go out, and 6 months later we take it down, or sometimes it just goes into into a vault, never to be seen,
Yeah.
unless we need some clips for sketches.
For a
and
quick trailer.
Yeah.
So with a sketch, I can see how you can say, okay, I know we need to do that line better, or we need to rehearse this. But when you're doing improv, how do you prepare for a show? How do you rehearse improv, basically?
Well,
because you have your regular games that you play.
Yes. Yeah.
And presumably there's a decision made as to which ones you're going to put in
Yes.
this time round. And
so our next show is in 2 weeks, or 2.5 weeks.
do you want to
April.
reshoot that? So the next show's in 2 weeks.
The next
as opposed to the next
I
show's in
don't-
2 weeks.
I don't know when this is going to go out. So just like just for sake of argument, sake of like our thinking, our next show's in 2 weeks, or 2.5 weeks, and we are yet to meet and yet to rehearse. So we've not done a show together since this time last year,
Yeah.
and even then Neil was missing. So we've not done a show with Neil since pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
And he's not coming up until the night before the show, so he's done London. But we kind of get together starting maybe 2 weeks beforehand, usually like a month. Well, I like to have a bit more preparation, because I never think I'm ready. And we'll go, right, we've got 2 hours to fill, we're going to do X, Y, Z, this will fill that amount of time, and then we'll kind of know who's going to be in the games. So we go, right, well, Ross and I are in forward reverse, Oliver's hosting, so when we rehearse it 3 or 4 times, Oliver will host it and me and Ross will be in it, just so that when we come to do it on the night with the audience's suggestions, me and Ross are the ones up to speed on that game. We don't want to waste time rehearsing a game that we're not going to be in. And I think it doesn't really take a lot. We take maybe 3-4 rehearsals to get back to speed. But pre-show, like the half an hour before a show, that's when it gets weird.
Yeah.
And let you take over if you want.
I was going to go back to the preparation for the show itself. It's basically just playing the games over and over again.
Yeah, it's just us doing a show for ourselves.
But we say Oliver chooses bad things. What we try and do is do the worst stuff we could imagine, so we're ready for anything the audience gives us. Just also to get some of it out of our system, because the thing with improv, you can't prepare, so we can play these games over and over again, and every time we do it, all right, so it's all animal themed, and when the show comes along, for example, it's all food themed, so you can't prepare that way, but the only way to do it is just play the games constantly. And it's really, I'd say it's difficult because there's no audience, but we are still trying to make each other laugh. And I think
Which is difficult in itself, because we now know just not to laugh.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But yeah, it's that weirdness of, if we find it funny, someone will find it funny. So the preparation itself is like, we can prepare the bread and bring the bread along, and the bread will be the same every time, but whatever the filling is what the audience brings in. So we'll make good bread to start.
It's a good metaphor.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's good, yeah. I wonder where you're going with that. No, okay.
Yeah, so the bread's going to be good every time, but it depends what the audience gives us. And so, yeah, improv relies a lot on the audience. So if the audience don't give us a suggestion, we're kind of like, your sandwich is dry.
The audience can be, I've been to a bunch of your shows now, and there are times when the audience are terrified. I think there's a lot of worry that it's about audience participation.
Yes.
A horrible phrase that sends me scurrying to the back. How do you break that barrier? Can it be broken? Is there a way?
I think sometimes it just takes the first domino to fall. Someone goes, we ask for a suggestion, and someone is brave enough to shout out, and then they see that we don't pick on them, we don't pull them down and make them do stuff they don't want to do. So sometimes that helps. Other times is sometimes when we do pull people down to help us with our games, we don't make fun of them. They're never the butt of the joke. They're adding to the comedy, but they're never the butt of the joke. And I think again that helps relax the audience. Like whatever happens, we know that we're there to make people laugh. We're not there to be mean. We're not there to make other people put them in the spotlight. Like we know that we're there for us to be the idiots. As I call it, professional arseholery. We're just being arses. Like and we're not there to make a fool of anyone else. And I think once the audience see that, they do kind of relax.
Yeah.
I think when we've done cities and comedy clubs, again after the first suggestion or two, because they're told not to shout at the acts, and then we come on and go, shout at us.
Yeah.
And I think once that they see that we're not going to like turn them down or whatever to or shout back at them or make them feel silly for shouting out, they do tend to relax.
I think as well the problem, there's a big stigma behind the word improv, and you say improv and you imagine this therapy person being a tree or whatever, and like, oh, embrace your inner cat and stuff like that. It's hard to break through that. I find one of the gigs we had at a comedy club, the compere basically went, all right, so got some improv up next. Hands up who's heard of improv. Hands up who hates improv. Here's Damn Night Comedy. And we're like, oh, okay.
And like when you've got a slot like 10, 15 minutes, you've got to spend the next 5 minutes winning people back over.
Yeah.
No, you already had to win them over, but now they're expecting you to be bad.
But we did.
But we did win them over.
Did you win the compare over?
I don't know. I think we ignored them.
I remember just on the subject of compares, this has always bothered me. But we did a gig once, same comedy club, different compare, and I think afterwards, as we were, like we'd had 10, 15 minutes of rolling laughter, and as we were leaving, I just went, you know, if anyone's enjoyed us, check out our social media, and I gave our social media, and we got like ripped for doing that when we by the compare when he came back on, so oh, someone's big for the books. And we just had 15 minutes rolling laughter. Like, why are you so worried? Like, if that was a comedian, they probably wouldn't have done that. Like, my name's Jerry Smith. Find me on Facebook. Like, they wouldn't have done that, but because we were not their version of comedy. Yeah. It's almost like we're enemies with them, but we're there to.
And even at one of the first ones, one of the comments after was like, "Oh, yep, we'll let them on. We'll get our grant." Kind of thing, like we're a tick box for them. But yeah, so that stigma is hard to break through. This improv isn't as advanced as written comedy.
Is there a thing where you have to? There must be a certain amount of trust in yourself. You know that you are going to be funny.
I think I trust them more than I trust myself.
I know. I'm sorry, I'm interrupting here, but I know if what I say dies on its arse, I don't have to get myself out of that hole. I can trust Ross, Oliver, or Neil to come in with something funny, change the script, move it on, and I'm like, right, well that died, but we're on to the next thing now. And we've already on to the next laugh. Like it's already happening. I trust that if I come up with an idea and it's not funny, someone else will come up with a better idea. It's not in me. It's in Ross.
So is that something that was always there with you all? Or is that something where you've kind of gone, there's been a point where one of you had to say, I have to trust you to take me out?
I think we just all realised it bit by bit. When you start, you're thinking, oh, got a great idea, we'll do a show. It'll be based on the audience suggestion, it'll be fine. But then as you're doing the sketches or doing the games, you kind of realise that, I mean, it's not a one person thing, but there's a group of you, and it's not, I've got an idea, they've got an idea, they've got an idea, and it smushes together well then, but you think, right, if I said that, it'd be hilarious, but it doesn't fit into the story, so you kind of keep that quiet. So as a group, we've just worked, and I think, got to the point where I
think it's industry wide, but improv wide as well, because we've done gigs where we've kind of meshed with other improv groups, and it's the same now. You want for you to be funny, you can't be the only funny one on a stage with 5 people. Everyone on that stage has to be funny. Yeah. And otherwise, it's just so obvious that you're out there for yourself. And whereas you want the audience to laugh and remember it and have a good time, you can't let someone on that stage die, because that not only does that like draw the attention to them being bad and maybe you trying to steal the limelight, but it just kills all the momentum, and it instantly goes, oh, the audience go, oh no, and that they're uncomfortable again, and all that work you've done to make them relax and like let them know they're allowed to laugh and allowed to shout out, they go, oh, this is awkward, this is horrible. And I've been in the audience when that's happened, and it's been like,
it's when people come in, we've seen it where people come in, they've got their own personal agenda, and they think it's funny to have not political comments, but a personal agenda like issues or things like that don't really fit into the scene, but they're drawing attention to it, and the audience kind of, as Duncan says, just cowers away from it.
Yeah.
I think that's something with us. We never focus on any hidden agenda or anything. Basically, anything we make up is entirely what the audience asks for. We've not thought, oh, we'll make it about politics or gender or anything like that. It's just this natural, flowing.
So it sounds like, I mean, I know there are rules, sort of rules in inverted commas, of stand-up comedy and sitcom comedy.
Yeah.
So it does sound like there's certain sort of do and do nots with improv as well. Is this
I don't know. I think we're not special or individual, but because we've done this ourselves, and because we're one of the only improv groups that we know of for 60 miles in all directions, there's no plan to follow. There's no other groups to talk to. No rules to follow on stage with other people. It's like we're doing this because it works for us.
Yeah.
And when we go to other comedy clubs and there are other improv groups there, and the very few times we've done it, like if it's their comedy club, we'll abide by their rules. But there's nothing that we've ever sat down and went, right, this has to happen, or we can't let this happen, or if this happens, then someone's got to jump in.
Yeah.
It just kind of happened. Like I think you kind of know if something's working and not working, and if it's working, keep doing it. If it's not working, try and stop it.
I think it's definitely, over the years, we've become aware of rules that do exist, that we don't, it's not that we ignore them, we just didn't realise they existed, and they don't apply to us, so we don't feel they're necessary. We try to do personal research by following people on Facebook and groups like that, and there was one point where there was a big discussion on Facebook that I think Neil jumped in and Mark jumped into, and when I read into it more, it was stuff that we didn't understand. So basically it was one group weren't going to use the word pimping anymore, because it could be seen as forced sex work and connotations of stuff like that. But I thought they just didn't want to use the word pimping, but the word pimping itself means chucking someone on the bus for a cheap laugh in the world of improv. It's words we never knew. And it got to the point where people in the chat were saying, oh, well, we're not going to use this word anymore, we're not going to say that in case it offends people. And one group wasn't going to say the word male anymore, or white male. And I was like, if you start putting crosses through words just in case someone gets offended, then it really rules out a lot of options you've got. And if the audience, you can't preempt what the audience is going to say, so you can't say, right, during this show, we're not going to mention farmers and cats or whatever in case it offends someone. You kind of have to wait for what the audience asks for and give that back to them. So
we've done some gigs where the suggestions have been maybe risque, and we've kind of went, right, we'll go with it, and then they've crossed the line and went, right, we're not going to do that.
Yeah.
And we've done that before. But I think, and personally, this is not a damn right position, but like, if you go through life not wanting to be, like, avoiding things because you might get offended or being offended on behalf of other people, like, you're making everyone's world a bit smaller, for lack of a better term. Like if you genuinely get offended at something, okay, I'll come up to you individually and apologise, but okay, I said something, I apologise to you, I didn't mean to offend you, but the other 99 people in that room might have found that funny. Like we shouldn't strike a potential joke off the table because 1% of the population find it funny. I'll come and speak to you after and find out why if you're offended by it, but we shouldn't just go blanket no. Because if I'm not saying it would be a particularly like risque joke, but say a joke about cornflakes. Oh, my husband died of choking on cornflakes. Well, you know, we're not going to not do cornflakes jokes because that one person, that one gig was offended by cornflakes. It's just it gets into when it comes to like stuff like that, an offence and saying things and not saying things. It's just I'd rather apologise for saying something than go out of my way to avoid saying it. And even then, the phrase offence can only be taken, not given. Like it's down to that one person, the group of people. And if I talk to them and they're being offended on someone else's behalf, then it's not really being taken. It's like it's would you call that a white knight or something like that? Just someone trying to be a social do-gooder, but like not really understanding the aspects.
I works in all comedy, not just improv.
Yeah.
All comedians have that thing of can I say this, can I say that? And I think it's a tricky situation, but especially in improv, we can't say, right, we're not going to do that. Whereas if you're writing something, a lot of people will write a 10-minute comedy sketch or idea, and then you have to go, right, can you check this please and make sure it's fine? Can you check this as well? Like, check with a whole host of people to see if it's okay first.
But then you get comedians like Jimmy Carr and Bill Burr, who will write an offensive set, and they'll have their lawyers look at it, and they go, okay, you can't say that, but these are all legally fine. People will, and you go to the show expecting to be offended at some point. Like Jimmy Carr's audience go and heckle him, so he shouts abuse at them. Like they go for that. So you can't, like I say, you can't cancel all of Jimmy Carr's jokes and comedy because a handful of people who don't really like Jimmy Carr get offended at Jimmy Carr.
Then on the subject of that, the people who then watch the show are offended because they said to that person, even though it's between Jimmy and that person is offended on their behalf, and that's where all the trouble comes in. So if you come see our show, if you're offended by anything or see anything we've recorded that you're offended, come talk to us. We'll talk about it. We're not trying to offend people.
But not directly after the show, because usually we're knackered. So that's how we prepare for a show.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
And just also circling back to that.
Oh, because of the
pre-show stuff. Just because it's not insane, but we've got a variety of different like little games that we play. So one of them is just bouncing a ball between each other, like not letting it touch the ground, which is surprisingly effective at like waking us up and getting us energetic.
Verbally or anything, just letting the ball touch the ground.
And then we've got different little games like word association, where to a beat, which is quite quick, you've got to say a word that associates with the previous word, which I think is quite common, and then we then do word disassociation, which is the same game except the following word can have nothing to do with the previous word. And it's difficult, but it gets our brains working, and I think that's where a lot of our comedy comes from. Is it's very left field. You think it's going to go down one way, and then something else. Like you're driving along a country lane of comedy, and then a train comes in and takes it down, like in a totally different direction. And that's kind of what we do well is we're silliness, and you go, okay, this is a bit silly. Where's this going to go? And then people who've seen us before will see a train coming, but they don't know if it's going to come in the form of Ross or me or Ollie.
Because that is the thing. You play Berwick obviously more often than anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Small place, traditionally very conservative, big C and small c. You have where you play in the Malting studio is quite a small audience. It's what
65,
70. Yeah.
And there's usually about that many people there, but that's not necessarily the same people every time.
No.
But there's a certain amount of that.
I'd say we've got a good amount of people who continually come. I think each show we get new people in who are either just in the area or
that's friends of people. Yeah. And I think each show we get, like we're doing 2 nights this time, people will come to both nights, which is great because it's the same setup, it's the same framework for both nights.
Same games both nights, but there'll be completely different suggestions, obviously.
The meat of it is completely different. So.
Because one of the first best backhanded comments we ever got was the very first show. These people who were just visiting and went, I'm not coming back, it's all scripted. I'm like, oh wow, you think our first show's scripted? And it's like entirely made up. And even friends of ours who say, oh, it's all scripted, because a lot of the audience members who are brave enough to get up in the participation songs are people we know or friends who come up. So they think, oh, you prepared it with them, and like, we haven't. And there was one last year. Like, I'm like, oh, it's all scripted. And like, oh, I'm going to suggest myself to go up. And it's like, oh, wow, that was actually amazing.
And we've had people go like, well, okay, so it's not all scripted, but you've got certain bits, certain like ones that are pre-planned. And we're like, no. Like the sketches that we do, and we'll say, like it's quite clearly a sketch because we don't ask for suggestions. We'll film it and we'll put it on a big screen. They are quite clearly, I would say rehearsed, because more often they're written.
The idea is something, and then we...
But we kind of fudge it on the night. But that is a great compliment to us. We're like, okay, it's written though, isn't it? It's like, no, it's our brains happening. As you screamed the word, and then we did a 10-minute scene on that word.
Yeah, you can't sit there and rehearse every single conceivable word. Because
I mean, I've seen improv shows before, and I'm not going to drop names, Oxford Imps, but No, it was a small room, so they couldn't do a huge amount with it. But they basically did an improv radio play, and at the start they asked for suggestions for names and places and like countries and whatever. And you could tell, or I could tell as a person who did improv, that they did a pre-rehearsed script, and at certain points they dropped the names of the. It didn't like it would be the same story every day for a month, but on day one they'd say India, on day two they'd say Brazil, on day three they'd say America, on day one they'd say Sally, on day two they'd say Rebecca. Like it's just like that was the show, and I'm like, okay, it is funny, but it's not improv, is it? It's what do you call those books?
Choose your own adventure kind of
Yeah,
thing.
Mad Libs, is that what it was?
Yeah.
But to be fair to them, I saw them a couple of years prior to that, in a bigger room, and they were, again, a lot of it improv, but we do a song, a game called Rap Battle, where music starts at a random point and we have to rap. They did something similar, except it just seemed like they were either very good at rapping for Oxford students, or it was something that had again been pre-written and they were just slotting in words. But no, we genuinely don't.
So do you ever worry that the audience here, you'll become so used to them, they'll also become so used to you that it will be harder for you to translate elsewhere?
Elsewhere, as in different venues?
Different venues,
I don't
different
think so, no.
audiences, different places.
Audiences are all very, very different. Even audiences we have here, they're very different. You'll get the usual, like, give a suggestion, for example, a shop like Ann Summers. Everywhere you go, Ann Summers dildos. You get it all the time. And you can use it every time and do it differently every time, but everywhere you go, you'll get that. But it's always different. Again, as the night goes on, as people get more relaxed, they'll shout out better suggestions or weirder suggestions just to try and trip us up. But everywhere you go, you get different people, different attitudes, and different styles of suggestions coming through.
No, we've never had a bad gig in Newcastle. We've never had a bad gig in Edinburgh. We've had one bad gig in Glasgow, and that's probably our one bad gig.
I wouldn't have said it was a bad
It was just
gig.
We'd been booked for a gig and it was cancelled last minute, so we were quickly rebooked. So the person who ran the comedy club rebooked us with another comedy club that was happening that night, and it really was not.
It wasn't really a comedy club. It was a group of people who meet all the time and do sketches to each other, and we were just kind of these strangers there. I mean, the stuff we did I found hilarious.
No one else did.
But theirs was very like, here's a video I made, or here's a song I've done, and they're all loving each other, but there was no connection with us.
But I think one of the things that we do to we kind of feel out an audience. So we've got a little bit called Who Was the Cat, which is about 1:30, and I think whenever we do a new venue or a new place, or to be fair, every time we've done the stand, I think we've done it just because it's a upbeat, like energetic open, and if people laugh at that, we know we can go a bit weirder. And if people, because it's a weird song, and if people don't laugh at that, we know, right, we've got to tame it back a bit.
Straighter audience.
And I think that kind of helps us gauge where we go. But we know if I think we're all guilty of this. We'll start off quite normal, and then the things that we say and do or shout will get weirder and weirder and weirder. And the moment that the people start laughing less or go, what? That's when you know, right, that's the sweet spot. I think every comedy club has its own sense of humour, and we're quite lucky in the fact that we can do whatever we want to try and find that sense of humour. I mean, some comedians might have a couple of one-liners to test the waters, but we've got like a little laugh-o-meter, and we go, right, okay, it's going well, it's going well. Oh, it's not, okay, we're going to go back to what that was.
Don't say those again.
We're just going to stay there. We're going to stay away from Newcastle United Football Club. We're going to stay away from Balmoral Hotel. We're going to stay away from the Clooney. That's in Newcastle as well. I can't think of anything in Glasgow. But we just, okay, well, they don't like that. I'm going to stay away from that. Oh, they're really liking these football references. Let's chuck in a couple more. And, you know, Ross and Ollie not being massive football fans. Their references
Not
are
a clue.
they're from the 90s, the ones that they do know, which is even funnier because the most things that we can bring up today is from 20 years ago. So
But yeah, I don't worry about audiences getting used to us or us getting used to audiences. It's always going to be different.
the one thing I worry about, and it's the same with every show, is if I'm going to be on it that night,
Mm-hmm.
if I'm going to be funny and if I'm going to be quick enough. And as long as I trust that I am, and I know because I know where these guys are, then it's going to be all right.
So, I mean, speaking of familiarity, Berwick is notoriously quite a small place,
Yes.
and you guys don't do this full time. You have your day jobs, which are
Working in a theatre.
Financial advisor.
obviously. Do you get that horrible thing where someone comes up and says, "Oh, I recognise you'd be funny"?
Yeah.
What do you do with that?
I've got set bad jokes in my head ready
Oh,
that I use. What do you want?
Yeah, just one second.
Well, I was actually in one of the shows in one of the games called Brain Freeze. It's one we made up, and basically during the game, it was like Park Bench where someone would shout freeze, go in and change it. But in this game, Oliver shouts freeze and gives us horrendous suggestions. So the scene has to carry on as normal, but we have to do extra things. So like
freeze Ross's kangaroo leg. So
yeah, every third word you have to clap and bow. And one was Ross is trying to try out bad jokes, and the one I always do is I've just bought a really small boat shop to sell tall ships, and sales are through the roof.
yeah.
And I'm like, that's it, bad joke, it's fun.
I don't know. I think I don't think I get recognised often. I think I don't know. If I do, I just kind of go, oh thanks. I'm not good at receiving compliments or talking to strangers.
Oh God,
so
no, I hate compliments.
So I was
Oh,
like, thanks. Did you like Ross? Or Ollie was good, wasn't he? Just deflect the attention. But it's strange, like I mean, you don't get that with any other jobs, do you?
Yeah.
You don't go like, oh, you work in a theatre, book me a ticket. Well, you do at your
Yeah,
job.
that's my job.
Like I don't get. In fact, no,
Humorous financial advisor.
no, I
You
do.
do.
I was going to say at work, in the pub, and again, like, oh, you're a financial advisor. Can you help me with my pension? I'm like, I mean, if you come in, yes, but
So you get more harassment for being a financial advisor.
I do
than you
now,
for
yeah.
being-
I get recognised for other shows more than
yeah,
that night.
we do like theatre in Berwick as well. And
Yep.
I think that's got a bigger audience, so we get recognised more often from doing more
Did you
traditional
do the
theatre.
Here Come the Girls
Yes,
and Gary?
yes.
Is that massively different from improv, or is that?
In rehearsals, it's
yes.
not.
No, in rehearsals, no, it's exactly the same because it's us and Oliver as well as Gary and Paddy.
And Mark used to be in that
Yeah.
as well.
So rehearsals was usually us being us and the girls getting frustrated. I think that they get more frustrated because we mess around, go away for 5 minutes, come back, and our songs and dances are perfect. And they get so annoyed, like, what have you done? Like, just rehearsed it for 5 minutes. And then we mess around. But I think to the point, if we've done it for 10 years now, just done a 9th show, and we're at the point where the girls are happy for the comic relief, for us to be making everyone laugh. And it feels they relax more, they get more comfortable, they do a bit of a laugh.
So with your theatre stuff, is it more comedy, or do you look for something more serious?
I don't really look for much. I think it's whatever people offer, I'm happy to do. But it'll be a mix of everything. We've done straight shows, we've done comedy shows, I do pantomimes. So it's just everything for me.
Yeah, I'm about the same. I've been told I've got a tragic face, so I do get the I'm starting to get roles where they are a bit more serious and a bit more forlorn. I'm much more comfortable being the comic relief, even if it's a small part, than I am doing like a serious lead or a main lead. But we've done musicals, and musicals, a lot of them don't tend to be funny. But I like doing that as well. I like there's a certain camaraderie that comes with a musical that you don't really get with a play. A camaraderie that we kind of have with Here Come the Girls and Damn Night.
Yeah.
And that's the bit I enjoy.
I think it shows as well. If you've got that in a straight show or in a play, if the cast clicks and works well together, it really comes across. Even if it's a straight play, there's something that works well with a group that works well together.
Yeah, because you can tell when it's not there.
Mm-hmm.
You can tell which member of cast is the one that nobody else wants to particularly deal with.
Yeah, you can watching a play, you can tell. Watching a play, you can tell. Like this person has spent the last 3 months, 4 months rehearsing and talking to someone they hate, or not even talking to someone, talking at someone, and that person has just said their lines at someone they dislike, and you can tell that on stage.
Yeah.
Whereas I think if people genuinely get on and you have a good time with it, like we do with Damn Right, I mean, I think what helps with Damn Right is we're constantly trying to make each other laugh, which just improves the mood.
Mm-hmm.
There's no maybe do like a chalk and cheese situation, maybe do a series, but but there's nothing like that to bring down the mood or to cause tension or anything like that. It's all comedy, and there's no one big personality, or no one's better or bigger than anyone, no one's a bigger part. It's all just like, you have to do that, yeah, I'm happy to do that, or I'd rather not do that, or can I get on this? There's no one trying to be bigger than anyone else. We'd rather succeed as a whole and have a great show, like I said before, than have one person that's in the limelight and the rest are dying on their own.
So there's no future for Damp Night does Proust, or Damp Night discusses...
We'll never say no.
No, we can edit a script, can't we?
Would I like to do regular plays, scripted plays, straight plays would work well, because I know we're all good performers, and it would, because we work well together, would work well together in whatever we do, I think. But back to there's no lead man. Once we get on stage, we're all equal. No one's going to try and take the lead or
backstage and the lead man.
Obviously.
Yeah. There's no egos. There's no egos in the group. There's no one trying to lead it. No one trying to tell us where we need to go. Things like that.
So what are your plots and plans, both within and without Dark Night? Dark Night? Giving things away. Damp Night.
So next show is April. After that, we are planning to have an open evening. We're going to find a date and invite people to come along to see how we do things. So it's like an open rehearsal kind of thing. Basically, people can say, look, if you want to come along, see how we rehearse, or just play some of the games, we'll be doing that. And also, we're going to try and build just a list of people. Yeah,
like some people might be interested in joining, to maybe fill in for. So we've got some gigs coming up in Edinburgh, Newcastle, maybe just Newcastle. And for example, if Ollie lives in Edinburgh now, if we're down in Newcastle, he might not be able to make it. So ideally, we need 3 people for a gig. So some people who might want to jump in and circle in for one night, twice a year, or if we do a show in Berwick and I've got the flu, they can jump in and do that as well, just if they feel comfortable.
Or just a list of people that would film a sketch thinking, look, we need 5 people to be rubber trees.
Rather than us playing every little part.
Yes. Because there's a long running idea of an actual sitcom.
Oh, we're giving away secrets now.
We are, but won't go into too much details. Basically, it's based on the idea of the podcast.
Done with these.
Yes, thank you. We're done with them. Sorry.
Strike that from the record.
Thank you very much. You didn't interrupt anything at all.
Okay.
Anyway, as we were.
So we have this long idea to possibly make a sitcom. So we do have a podcast that we got up to about 96 episodes into, and they're all complete. Again, it's like there's no preparation. It's go and sit.
And you can tell for some of them.
Yes.
I'm not the biggest fan of probably about a quarter of them.
Yeah. There's some bad ones. There's some amazing ones.
Ian's in one of them.
Yes.
Yeah, that's one
2.
of the bad ones.
No, that's true.
Was it just one?
Was that the clown hockey ones? Is that?
I genuinely can't.
There was a clown hockey one, and then we did a futuristic Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah,
we did
I do recall there was something involving roleplay, but I just recall that my brain went.
The one way I think Oliver just made you an old man in an attic, and
that was a clown. That was a clown hockey team.
There was a clown hockey team, and that just makes me laugh. Genuinely.
But yeah, so as we were making the podcasts, it just slowly developed that it was actually there's not a story behind it, but we always assumed we were living in a very small one-room house all together, And then we went on the Stewart Adventures, and so it got to the point where I was like, we could use this and make a sitcom out of it. So we've kind of thought up the whole series, maybe 6 or 8 episodes, ideas, thought of the idea for the pilot, but unfortunately the pilot one is probably the most complicated one, set in a zoo. But again, so the idea of that would be, so bits of my idea would be we're all playing all the parts. So there's background characters,
it's like a Mighty Bush in that sense,
and,
Monty Python,
or League of Gentlemen, that kind of stuff. You know who's playing each character, and they're all these completely. So there's us, and then a world of horrendous, extreme characters. It's their extreme features, but I think some of them are based on very normal characters who are a bit odd, and then you've got some people who are a jaguar child, chariot, half chariot, which wouldn't be part of it. That's a separate. That's another separate world of podcasts. Basically, when we were doing the podcasts, a lot of the time when Mark was here, it was us trying to wind him up.
Yeah.
And so we got to podcasts.
He hated us bringing in characters.
We'd bring in lots of characters in the podcast. So knock, knock, who's at the door? And it'd be some random person.
Ring, ring, it's me, it's Terry Wogan.
And then so there's the first one he couldn't make. We're like, right, this episode is going to be as many characters as we can. And it became The Adventures of Billy, Kennedy Morgan and Smish the Jaguar Child.
Which then turned into a little, kind of like a series.
Yeah, so anytime Mark wasn't there, they're the podcasts we did. And so... Am I Billy? I was Billy. I was Kennedy. And me as Smish. And basically we just went on random adventures with insane characters, and it was I loved those because it was just this complete insanity, and you didn't know what was coming more than regular improv, because in your head going, oh, who's going to come in next? And then it was like a giraffe woman who was trying. Did you become a giraffe woman and then had to go down the magic rainbow? And
there was a slide at some point.
There was a slide. The coin counter king.
Bit
of a
rascal.
He was, So there's that world that I love these characters, but I think the more reality side of it, I really would like to do. I'd love to do.
I'd like to
Kennedy
actually
Morgan as an insane TV series.
I think that'd have to be animated. That would have to be animated.
I don't know. It could be just insane.
It's half jaguar, half chariot child at one point.
Yeah, it's true. But so I think that
would be a hell of a prop.
The one of us all living in the same house and going on these adventures, I think that's doable with enough silly adventures similar to Bush and Monty Python and League of Gentlemen, those kind of crazy characters. And it does actually lead somewhere in my head. I've got end of season 1, start of season 2, 2 seasons in my head. So season 1 at the end.
There's a message.
There is a message in it.
It's actually weird. Like, I don't want to give too much away, but
we did it. And we're like, holy shit! I had chills
during the start of lockdown. When we, I think Neil was down in London. Yeah. Ollie was in Edinburgh. Can't remember. Mm-hmm. And obviously we couldn't see each other. We sat down and we tried to do a couple of podcasts over Zoom, which didn't really work. We didn't have the same energy. We weren't feeding off each other's laughter and like insanity. So we're like, okay, well, rather than do that, how about we try and sit down and we'll storyboard this sitcom idea. And the more we spoke about it, and we're like, right, we can bring elements of the podcast in, but the more we spoke about it, the more we're like, oh, we can do this and we can do this and we can do this. And it's genuinely, I think, like, if you take the damp night comedy side out of it, the story and the premise of the series is actually quite poignant and quite touching, but then we obviously ruin that with just inane comedy. But you still get the message, and at bits. We've kind of storyboarded the pilot. We've not really written it.
Well, we've got rough ideas of what each episode could be, but again, not in detail. That's stuff I'd want to.
Yeah, but at bits like it. So you've got the comedy, and then the comedy just stops for a second, but you don't really know it's stopped until the last episode, where that kind of like ties everything together.
Did you saw Westworld? Oh, so
I've not.
Have you not? So the series Westworld I loved, and each episode was like, oh, that's a lovely little 10-piece jigsaw, 10-piece jigsaw. And then when you got to episode 10, you went, oh, actually, all these jigsaws go together. And that's what the final idea of that is. Once you get to the final episode, you're like, oh, this all fits together. Like, it works by itself, but then as a whole, you go, actually, yeah, that's well done.
Yeah, if you watched an episode, hopefully it would be funny. If you watched a series, it would be a story, like a story. Which I think I'm if we ever go into writing it, I'm actually quite excited about.
But I think that's so many, like, just from in the past of sketch ideas we've had that haven't gone the way I want. I mean, they're good, but there's so many little details, like a big crowd in the background, for example, we never did, or things like that. It's just something I want to have the budget, the technology, the manpower, and the people to make it how we see that. But that's a big future thing.
Cool. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah,
And the
no
next
problem.
show is
April 14th and 15th.
Dexter's Labradoratory at the Maltings Theatre in Berwick on Tweed.
Yes. Tickets are £7.50.
Will it be available online as well at some point? Is there
We should get it. We'll hopefully get it filmed.
because you have a website as well. You should promote.
Do
We do have a website. It's,
I don't think it's been
a Wix,
updated.
it's a Wix site,
Right.
and I think I
You have a
updated it.
YouTube channel as
We
well.
do.
Yes, so
Right.
you can find us on Facebook,
Damp Night Comedy.
Instagram,
Damp Night Comedy.
Twitter,
At the Damp Nights.
YouTube,
Damp Night Comedy.
live and in person,
The
Right
Maltings
here,
Theatre.
yes.
And on Snapchat.
and on Snapchat, and podcasts on most podcast services. Yes,
Just Damp Night with a K.
yes,
Comedy.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
You're very
Thank you.
We went on a bit there.